There are broadcasts you remember because of what happened on the field. And then there are broadcasts that stay with you because of how they made you feel, because of their tone or their laugh. For a time, three of these magical voices sat together, inviting millions into the booth with them. But it didn't last. Things never do. If this episode were a movie, I'd start with a fade in from black, panning the camera across a Major League Baseball field, up through the bleachers, higher and higher to the long enclosed section dedicated to broadcasters. Then I'd pan through the window to a desk in the corner with a framed photograph of three older men with genuine smiles on their faces and microphones on the table in front of them. The three men are Barber, Mel Allen, and Phil Rizzuto. The photo would have been taken in 1962. At this point, it's been 6 years of these three men working together to broadcast the New York Yankees. They would have had their struggles, their disagreements, but also many shared memories and bonding experiences. And at that moment, none of them knew what was coming. In time, all three of these voices, so familiar, so trusted, would disappear from the booth. Two would be fired. One would be undone by his own behavior. Three men who became institutions of Yankee baseball, gone. How did that happen? From historic milestones
That's it! Holy cow! A strikeout gets his 300th career win, and I tell you, this is...
to euphoric moments shared by millions,
In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened.
to the simple banter that brought us together.
But yeah, it's foul. Malachi with the call. I love that name.
It's a good name.
When you and I have a child together, we should name him Malachi.
Welcome to the Midnight Library of Baseball, Season 4, the broadcast that raised us, from radio to television and beyond. I'm Ben Orlando. For a Yankees fan tuning into a broadcast between 1957 and 1964, they wouldn't have anticipated a trio of voices working together. Instead, they would have looked forward to three distinct performances, sometimes in different orders, but together forming a familiar rhythm of the night, with Phil Rizzuto and Barber usually building up to the main act, Mel Allen. Phil Rizzuto, down-to-earth, jovial, with endless insider stories to ease you into the night.
Ball game just underway. On the 4th of July, happy birthday to our boss, George Steinbrenner. He's a firecracker for sure.
Then Barber with his folksy expressions and dedication to describing exactly what he saw, so you could feel like you were there.
Left, the infield overshifted. Here's the pitch. Swung on, belted. It's a long one. Deep into left center. Back goes Jean Frito. Back. He makes a one-handed catch against the bullpen. Oh, doctor.
And then the main act, Mel Allen, who, as one fan put it, quote, captivated generations with a voice as smooth as a well-placed slider, end quote.
2 outs, nobody on. And this is what the people have come to see. There it is. There it is. If it stays fair, there it is, number 60. How about that? There's standing ovation.
Mel Allen was the blockbuster, the exclamation point, whose famous calls resonated with fans long after the moment had passed. For a Yankees fan, there would have been electricity running through your back and neck and fingers and arms at the anticipation of this glorious lineup. I'm going to get to hear Rizzuto and Barber and Allen. I can't wait. And then, one day, suddenly, the anchor, the main attraction, Mel Allen, is gone. In 1964, Mel Allen, known as The Voice, vanished. The Yankees had fired him. No warning, no explanation, just gone. For 24 years, Allen had been everywhere. He was not only the voice of the greatest dynasty in sports history, he was the voice of the World Series, of the All-Star Game, even the Rose Bowl. He coined phrases like going, going, gone, and he gave Joe DiMaggio the name Joltin' Joe. He narrated Babe Ruth's final appearance at Yankee Stadium. He was there for Mantle, Larson, Maris, Gehrig. Millions of listeners, children and adults alike, grew up hearing baseball through him. By 1964, his voice wasn't just familiar, it was home. And then, one day, it was gone. Think about that. You're a Yankees fan. For 24 years, your comfort, your welcome home voice, Mel Allen, is suddenly gone at the start of the 1965 season. No explanation. As if he never existed. What does that feel like? As humans, we scramble to find an answer, to put the pieces together. And in the absence of hard facts about what happened to Mel Allen, all that was left was speculation. From Sports Illustrated writer William Taffy, quote, Allen became a victim of rumors. He was supposed to be a drunkard, a drug user. Neither rumor was true, but he couldn't fight them. It was as if he had leprosy, end quote. But when we zoom in, we can see that Mel Allen's firing wasn't the first sign of fragility in the booth. A year earlier, during the 1963 World Series, according to writer Ron Powers, Mel Allen, quote, began to omit croaking, almost choking sounds, end quote. And then he suddenly went mute. He couldn't talk for the rest of the broadcast, and Vin Scully had to step in. Allen blamed a flare-up of a nasal condition, but others called it psychosomatic. And there were more stories. Even earlier, Jerry Coleman described a strange experience during a game with Allen. Quote, he kept talking and talking. I couldn't interrupt. He was wild, end quote. Colleagues described Allen sometimes talking endlessly, then suddenly freezing. Or he'd space out in the middle of a broadcast. Or he might look at you, someone he knew well, like you were a complete stranger. His frenetic pace, his decades of nonstop work, may have been catching up to him. And for help in continuing to be superhuman, Allen turned to Dr. Max Jacobson, otherwise known as Dr. Feelgood. Jacobson's medical cocktails included amphetamines, vitamins, and even human placenta. They were meant to keep Allen moving through the grueling schedules, but they may have also created swings of energy, euphoria, and disorientation. But Allen didn't stop. Bud Blattner, a former colleague, said this about Allen's pace. Quote, Mel would take a pill to get up, a pill to fall asleep. He'd do a game, jet somewhere for an ad, then tape a movie-tone newsreel. Jesus Christ, I'd say, you don't need this. Slow down. He wouldn't, end quote. And the medicine would have given him a feeling of invincibility. Author Truman Capote described the effects of Dr. Feelgood's drugs as, quote, you feel like Superman. You go 72 hours straight without so much as a coffee break, end quote. And from Kennedy biographer Richard Reeves, quote, its effect was an exaggerated sense of power and capabilities, and the debilitating symptoms of classic paranoid schizophrenia, end quote. Mel Allen was not Dr. Feelgood's only prominent client. I mentioned Truman Capote, but also John F. Kennedy, who swore by the medicine. But when JFK's brother Bobby learned of this relationship and saw the effects of the drugs, he banned Dr. Max Jacobson from the White House. It's likely Mel Allen didn't realize how much the medicine had altered him. And the Yankees? What did they know? Did they not know what others had picked up on for years? And if they did know, couldn't they have helped rehabilitate their leading man, the voice of the New York Yankees? By 1964, Allen was only 51 years old. He was in the prime of his career for a broadcaster. And yet, just like that, he was gone. Allen himself would later speculate that a sponsor, Ballantine Beer, wasn't happy with him. Maybe. Or maybe it was all the accumulated weight of overwork, pills, and human limits catching up to him. Maybe it was a deep denial on his part on what had happened, on the fact that his pushing too hard had ultimately sabotaged his career. Mel Allen vanished from baseball for more than a decade, and his return in 1976 to the Yankees was thanks to, of all people, George Steinbrenner, who was the new Yankees president. But there's a story here. Steinbrenner, as a young man, was actually an assistant football coach for Northwestern and Purdue, and one day he sought out Mel Allen's advice. And Allen set aside 45 minutes to talk to this kid he didn't know, and Steinbrenner never forgot. So in 1977, Steinbrenner brought Allen back to broadcast a few games for a cable channel, which Allen did until 1985. And that same year, 1977, Allen hosted this new weekly show called This Week in Baseball, which he did until the day he died in 1996. When we look back at what actually happened in 1964, whatever the case, the result is the same. The voice that had been constant, warm, and familiar for generations of fans was gone. And in the booth, the silence was immediate. One voice was missing, and two men were left to fill the space. I wonder what Red Barber thought of Mel Allen's implosion. He must have noticed the change. And I say this because Red Barber placed telling the truth above all things. And it probably got him fired from the job he loved. But for the story of Red Barber, it's all about perspective. Long before Barber was suddenly fired in 1966, 2 years after Allen, he was at the peak of his career announcing for the Brooklyn Dodgers. He had complete control of the booth. He decided the innings, the commercials, who spoke when, every detail of the broadcast. Millions of listeners trusted his voice. He was the voice of authority, humor, and integrity. And yet perspective is fragile. Barber began broadcasting around the same time as Mel Allen, in the 1930s. And like Allen, he came up through radio, even doing recreations. And Red Barber despised broadcasters who faked the action for their listeners, like Ronald Reagan. To him, authenticity mattered more than applause. Barber drew on his Southern roots to shape his voice in the booth. A Southern drawl peppered with colorful phrases like, sittin' in the catbird seat, or they'll tear up the pea patch before the day is over. Barber's catchphrases endured. Most famously, back, back, back.
Back. He makes a one-handed catch against the bullpen.
It's such a simple set of words, but this is well known for any baseball fan. Barber developed this simple phrase because he watched the outfielders, To him, that was where you looked to see where the ball would go or if it would leave the park. And decades later, ESPN's Chris Berman revived the phrase as an homage to Barber's legacy.
Billy. This is a sweet swing to center field. Back with Jim Evans. Back. Gone!
Yet off the air, he was a cultured man, living on Park Avenue, enjoying opera and the classics. Broadcaster Ernie Harwell, who came up under Barber, said it was ironic. He said, quote, "On the air, he sounded like some guy from the backwoods, but he really wasn't," end quote. But from Barber's perspective, there was nothing wrong with splitting himself. He wasn't lying to listeners about who he was. This was simply who he was in the booth. By 1953, though, his perspective had begun to slip. Barber had spent years broadcasting Dodgers games and World Series games under the thumb of sponsors like Gillette. And over the years, Barber was incensed by how much they paid him, which was $200 for a World Series game. To Barber, this was unacceptable. And when he went to complain to Dodgers owner Walter O'Malley, O'Malley replied, quote, "That's your problem," end quote. Barber later wrote in his autobiography, quote, "O'Malley wanted to cut me down to size. About the most devious man I ever met," end quote. This was the final straw. Because of this dispute, because of how much he was getting paid for World Series games, Barber walked away from the Dodgers. He quit. And what he lost was enormous. The Yankees quickly hired him, but his role was different. He reported pre- and post-game shows, and he called a few innings, but he was not in charge in any way. He lost almost everything because he was angry with his pay. This is what I'm talking about when I say perspective. Red Barber was on top of the world. He was announcing for the Brooklyn Dodgers. He had complete control in the booth. He had autonomy. But he quit because he felt he wasn't being paid what he was worth. So let's break that down. He quit over $200 a game for World Series broadcasts. In today's currency, that's about $2,500, which is not much for a World Series game. It's hard to break down exactly how much broadcasters make today because World Series coverage is lumped into a yearly salary. But the top broadcasters make $10 to $15 million. But everyone in sports is paid more today than they were in the 50s. And in terms of how much Barber made yearly, he signed a 3-year deal with the Dodgers worth $105,000. Today, that would come out to around $426,000 per year. So he was not hurting for money. But in this case, money equaled value. And that's the case in so many areas of entertainment today. Sports, film, television. It makes sense, and it also makes no sense. Just look at Red Barber. He was flying high at the top of his career, announcing for one of the greatest ball clubs in history. And he threw it all away because he believed he wasn't being valued. Perspective. How many ball players change teams, uproot their families, their lives, because they believe they're worth a few $1,000,000 more? When in fact, they already are making tens of millions of dollars. When in fact, the money makes no difference to the quality of their lives. Wouldn't it be great if, after a certain point, people could weigh their worth through something other than money? How different would the world be? That's not what Red Barber did. Back in the Yankees booth, Barber worked professionally but coolly with Mel Allen. They never broadcast at the same time. Allen took his innings, Barber took his. The format kept them apart, preventing any real conversation, any development of true rapport. It wasn't until Phil Rizzuto joined in 1957 that a tentative camaraderie emerged, but not through friendship. They shared their disdain for ball players turned broadcasters. So now that tension entered the booth. By 1966, the final fracture came. Michael Burke, the New York Yankees president, told Barber the team would not renew his contract. Barber thought he knew why he was fired. He thought it was retaliation for telling the truth. On a cold, rainy day late in the season, only 413 fans showed up at Yankee Stadium. Barber, observing the scene, asked the camera to pan across the empty stands. When the cameraman refused, citing orders from above, Barber spoke anyway. He said, quote, "I don't know what the paid attendance is today, but whatever it is the smallest crowd in the history of Yankee Stadium. And this smallest crowd is the story, not the ball game." End quote. Returning to this concept of perspective, what was the perspective of the New York Yankees? If this is true, that they fired Barber because he reported the low attendance that day, how short-sighted is that? If you picture a metaphorical ancient scale, on one side you have Barber's prolific, historic career, and on the other side you have a few minutes of Barber pointing out the reality that few people turned out for a cold, rainy ball game. At the same time, it's not unbelievable to think this is the reason he was fired, because of image. And on this day, Barber showed the Yankees with their pants down. Although I'm sure if you asked 100 people, 99 would say this moment wouldn't influence one way or the other whether they decided to come to a game. In 1966, Barber was 58 years old. He was probably fired for reporting what he saw. This is what he had been taught. Principle had guided him since his introduction to broadcasting under Kennesaw Mountain Landis. It informed his coverage of Jackie Robinson, and it had guided him through the decades of baseball history. Yet now, that integrity collided with institutional priorities. And just like that, he was gone. Red Barber never returned to the Yankees. He retired from professional baseball broadcasting, but in 1981, he joined NPR's Morning Edition for a weekly segment called Fridays with Red, which he hosted for the next 11 years. For a man who loved radio and disliked television, it would have been like coming home. Barber died in 1992, leaving behind a legacy of authenticity, integrity, and the sound of baseball as it truly was. If you like Midnight Library of Baseball and want more, go to Patreon/Midnight Library of Baseball. There you'll find 16 episodes that will never appear on the normal feed. You'll also find full interviews and additional baseball content. The new Extra Innings episode is about Gabby Street, who you might never have heard of, but I tell the story of who this man is that was selected for Mr. Burns' All-Star team. I also tell the story of the first All-Star game, which some say was the greatest All-Star game in history, even though it occurred 22 years before the first official MLB All-Star game. Basic Patreon membership is $5 a month, and this really helps support the show. You can also write a review or rating at iTunes or other podcast platforms, and you can donate through midnightlibrarybaseball.com. I believe that tens of millions of people will benefit from slowing down, and that's my mission in producing the show. If you believe in this mission too, please support the show however you can. Thank you. Now, back to the show. We've come to the last of the three men, Phil Rizzuto, whose story is different from those of Barber and Allen. Rizzuto outlasted his colleagues by 3 decades, and the breaking point came not from scandal or ethics, but from the very qualities that made him beloved: loyalty, integrity, and heart. You can ask 100 people what they think of Phil Rizzuto, and you'll get 100 different answers. To some, Phil Rizzuto was a great New York Yankees shortstop. To some, he was the spark plug that helped the team win World Series after World Series. To others, he was a jokester, a loyal friend, a loving husband and father. To me, Phil Rizzuto was a baseball scholar, a man with 1,000 stories, and something of a community organizer. I can see him at the local community center in front of a microphone, announcing different events, announcing people's birthdays and anniversaries, which is what he did all the time behind the mic for WPIX.
And this young whippersnapper on my right, Dave, reminds me that it's also George M. Cohan's birthday. That's right, Yankee Doodle Dandy, born on the 4th of July. I'm sure there are a lot of other people born on the 4th of July, but those two come to mind right now. 2-0 to Moreland.
When he died in 2007, Rizzuto was the oldest living member of the Hall of Fame, just a month shy of his 90th birthday. And yet, even Rizzuto's enduring charm and integrity couldn't protect him from the final fracture. To be clear, he worked for the television network WPIX, not the New York Yankees, but the two organizations were definitely intertwined. In 1995, Mickey Mantle, a former teammate and lifetime good friend of Rizzuto's, died. It's funny in a way that Mantle, a man who was so powerful, so influential in life, would, in his death, shape the end of Phil Rizzuto's career. The funeral for Mantle would be held in Texas, and Rizzuto's broadcast partner, Bobby Mercer, decided to travel to Texas for the funeral. The original story is that WPIX told Rizzuto he couldn't go to the funeral because he needed to go to Boston to cover an upcoming game between the Yankees and Red Sox. And this is what Rizzuto told the press in a daily news article. WPIX refused to let him go. And here is an account from Eldon Ham in his book, Broadcasting Baseball. Quote, "When Mickey Mantle died in 1995, the corporate suits at WPIX, or maybe it was the Yankees brass who had the right of approval over their broadcaster, refused to let Rizzuto, the quintessential Yankee fan, broadcaster, and teammate, attend the funeral. They demanded he broadcast a road game in Boston instead, which devastated Rizzuto." End quote. During that Yankees-Red Sox broadcast, Phil Rizzuto was distraught. People who saw him and interacted with him that night said he was inconsolable. During the broadcast, Rizzuto continued to make comments about not being at the funeral, about how he should have been there, about what a mistake he'd made. After 5 innings, Rizzuto couldn't take it anymore and walked out of the broadcasting booth. From Rizzuto, quote, "They tried to drag me back, but I wouldn't." End quote. Shortly after this game, Rizzuto decided to quit. A New York Daily News article quoted him saying that WPIX's refusal to let him go to the funeral greatly influenced his decision to quit broadcasting. But then, a few days later, Rizzuto changed his story. He said he initially agreed with the station's decision to send Mercer to the funeral, and that he'd broadcast the game. He said, quote, "I had nobody to blame but myself." End quote. Now, what's the truth? Well, there's another quote from Rizzuto telling a reporter that, quote, "People are trying to get me to bow out a little more gracefully," end quote, which to me supports the original story. And of course it's true. Rizzuto at any point could have said, "To hell with you, Yankees and WPIX. I'm going to the funeral of my friend." He had free will. But at the same time, it does seem like the Yankees and WPIX encouraged, if not strongly urged Rizzuto to stay and do his job. My question is, why weren't the Yankees and WPIX insisting that he go to the funeral? there would have been no question at this point of Rizzuto's friendship with Mantle. What is one single game compared to the meaning of a lifelong friendship and loyalty? And heck, WPIX and the Yankees could have used this for PR purposes, saying Rizzuto said he would stay, but we all told him he had to go because it was the right thing to do. It's also likely that after hearing of Mantle's death, Rizzuto wasn't in the frame of mind to make a sound decision. So I understand that Phil Rizzuto was a grown man who could have made his own choice, but it doesn't seem like the Yankees asked him, "Hey, do you want to go to the funeral?" And Rizzuto said, "No, that's okay. I'll stay here and broadcast." It sounds like they pushed him and Rizzuto relented, and then he regretted it deeply. It's also hard to believe Rizzuto would make up a story about the Yankees refusing to let him go. He was a stand-up guy. If it was all on him, he would have said that initially. In the end, WPIX and the Yankees convinced Rizzuto to stay another year. But the trust was broken. The final crack in the booth had spread, and it could no longer be contained. In 1996, the last of the three giants was gone. Of course, new voices came along, but for millions of fans, each loss was deeply felt. In sports, when athletes retire, they don't die. Yet for those who love them, it can feel like a death. Each time a voice vanished from the booth, a part of the game's body went cold and fell away. We can bring them back with memories, with stories like this, with sounds preserved.
Ralph Terry's next pitch, fastball just inside, and the count is 1-2. On curve, hit on the ground, in the hole, stretch back, no, he can't get it. He had his glove on the ball backhanded, but I believe that'll be a base hit anyway. I don't think he could have thrown Copley out. It goes as an infield single. Swings at a change of pace, and there's a big one bounce at Boyer at third. There's a throw over to first base to Papatone, and the side is the side in order again. At the end of the 2.5 innings of the first game, Los Angeles nothing, and New York nothing.
I thought I'd end tonight with, instead of a listener baseball story, a story from one of our main characters tonight. This is a short interview with Phil Rizzuto, talking about his time with Mel Allen.
You have said that there would be no broadcasting career for you if it were not for Mel Allen.
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Oh, I mean, he got me, I used to talk through my nose. He said the only bad thing about Mel, he would correct me on the air. My mother was furious. Like I put an R on everything. Gary Julia used to flip. I'd say Cuba. You know, it's typical Brooklyn, you know, R's on everything, and he'd correct me. And I would say Philadelphia Athletics. Mel would say, Phil, it's no A in it. It's Philadelphia Athletics.
On the air.
On the air.
Wow.
So anyway, I learned, you know, that way you learn. One good thing about it is it wouldn't happen again.
Right.
Yeah. He was great. He was like a conductor of an orchestra. He could start a game and in the middle and build a crescendo. Not like me. I got excited in the first pitch and hit, and I'd yell all through the broadcast.
Listen to this list. 40 years in the booth, alphabetically, these are the people this man worked with. Mel Allen, Red Barber, Pam Boucher, Rick Cerrone, Jerry Coleman, Whitey Ford, Bob Gamere, Joe Garagiola, George Grand, John Gordon, Hawk Harrelson, Fran Healy, Jim Cott, Mickey Mantle, I'm only at the M's, Billy Martin, Frank Messer, Bobby Mercer, Paul Olden, Spencer Ross, Tom Seaver, Bill White, Dom Valentino. I talked to White recently, which was a big deal getting him on the phone, as you know. And he said that in 18 years together, you and he, his words, never had a crossword.
Right, never. I look forward to going every day. He was really great, and he saved me a lot of time. You know, Cora
But look, she said, be careful when you're talking on the air. She says, everybody else has got a little trapdoor on the back of their head, and your thought goes in there, and it's the trapdoor says, should I do it? You do it. She says, yours is open all the time.
And Cosell was a guy who said you'd never make it,
yes,
right?
Yes, he did, Cosell. He said, you'll never make it. Your voice is no good for radio or TV.
40 years later. Calls. Roger Maris is 61st. Chambliss with the home run in the bottom of the ninth. Bucky Dent. Anyone stand out? Anything stand out?
No, the home run Mantle, the two home runs, other than that, Mickey Mantle hit in Washington.
The 565-foot shot.
565 hit off the scoreboard. Another one where he just missed by the most 6 inches of hitting it out of Yankee Stadium. Now they've built up the...
Right, you can't
do it. But I mean,
what was the secret to your success as a broadcaster?
I think because I hated to get statistics. I'd let all the other guys read through and give the statistics. And then I wouldn't talk baseball all the time. I'd give cooking lessons.
Talk about the cannoli delivery.
Cannolis, yeah, and birthdays. So I was big on birthday. People loved it. I get letters, and they just like...
I miss that now, don't you?
No, I don't. The fans do, but I don't. I mean, I loved doing it. It was so easy. It was,
some broadcasters have done it and continue to do it. Ernie Harwell does it in Detroit still, but we don't do that anymore, and that's unfortunate. What was the best part of being a broadcaster for the Yankees?
Well, you knew it was going to be an exciting game, and they'd almost always be in the World Series. And but I knew that I had set it up beautifully, because the story about me getting hit when I was in the minor leagues, lightning hit, and it killed the center fielder that we had. And this was Class D, my first year in Bassett. That was Bassett, Virginia. It knocked all the rest of the players down. Cuban catcher was praying, and so after that, every time lightning came, they know that I was going to leave. I got out of so many early games. Jerry Coleman said, "So long, Phil," he'd yell, and I'd go.
That was your excuse to be on the George Washington Bridge and be home.
So I did. That was one of the big things. But it was always good because the games were exciting, and they always went for the big players. There's always had great players on the team.
Yeah.
And you really enjoyed doing the games.
But not a guy to go into the locker room, talk to the players before.
I never went on the field after that. Never.
Right. Just come in and do the game.
Do the game.
And did him so well for 40 years, and boy, we miss him in the booth. We're with Hall of Famer Phil Rizzuto, number 10, a number that will never, ever again be worn by a New York Yankee.
Next time in episode 13, we'll hear the origin story of a broadcaster, from humble beginnings to a career behind the mic. Not only broadcasting, but conducting more than 500 interviews for the show Talking Baseball. Next time, my talk with broadcaster Ed Randall. The show is produced and edited by me, Ben Orlando. Music by Sergei Papkin and Ashot Danielian, and other artists at Pixabay and Artlist.io. Good night.